Hello, my name is Roisin and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I am shamelessly ripping off another booktuber. I watched a video recently that a Sunny Book Nook did over on their channel, which I'll leave linked in the description below, where they talked about the books and authors that they are never going to read. Just they have absolutely no interest in, or they have tried once or twice and are not going to give another shot. And I did do a video a bit like this fairly early on in my channel where I talked about popular booktube books that I was never going to read, but all of those were YA fantasy or YA fantasy, which is none of those things are my genre. So the fact that I'm not going to read them is not really the fault of those specific writers, but of the genre in which they write. So I thought it would be fun to do an updated video where I talk about literary and historical fiction writers that I am never going to read, or that I have attempted to read in the past and will never be going back to. I feel like the two and a bit years that I've been making videos on this channel, I have been kind of working out my taste more specifically, because I knew I liked historical, I knew I liked literary, but I've definitely been working out what niche is, like really niching down in the types of books that I do enjoy. And so I feel like I know myself, and that's what this video is about. It's about knowing my own taste. So I have a list of a few different literary and historical fiction writers that I'm never going to read. Some of these are fairly hyped, some of these less so, but I think like there are writers that I've thought I would never read, and then something happens that makes me want to read them. Jonathan Franzen, I think, is a good example of this. I never really was that interested in Jonathan Franzen. I'd sort of vaguely heard that there was some sort of controversy, still not sure what that's about really, but I was just like, nah, doesn't seem like it's for me. But now so many people have been raving about Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen that I feel like actually I might give him a go. So some of these people on this list might end up being taken off this list at some point, but I don't want anyone to try and persuade me to take them off my list. I feel like they need to organically come off my list. If you're trying to persuade me, that will probably make me like dig in further. Anyway, so the people on this list, I'm just gonna go in the order that I've written them down. And the first one is Kristin Hannah. So out of people who talk about historical fiction on BookTube, a lot of people talk about Kristin Hannah, particularly The Nightingale. Last year I did end up reading a Kristin Hannah book. I read The Four Winds when I was reading the Goodreads Choice Awards historical fiction, and I would never have picked up a Kristin Hannah if it weren't for that challenge, and I was proved right that that would not be for me. It's entirely not to my taste. I don't really read World War II fiction, which is what The Nightingale is, although it's not what The Four Winds was, and I prefer historical fiction to be rich and focused and not super plotty. I don't like a lot of like melodrama in my historical fiction, and I feel like that's what Kristin Hannah is. Just not particularly well written, like no real finesse or focus paid to the style of the writing, although it's much more about the like historical time period, but I feel like she paints in such broad strokes, and when I'm reading historical fiction I want that detail. I want everything to feel real, like Hilary Mantel. I don't want these like broad swaths of basic ideas of what the Depression was like, or what Nazi occupied France was like. It's just not for me. So the next person on my list is Delia Owens, and this is she's the writer of Where the Crawdads Sing. I don't know if she's written anything else. This is literally the only book I've heard from her, and I'm not going to be reading it for several reasons, but one of which is that her and her husband had to flee from Tanzania because they've been accused of murdering people, and I prefer not to read books by murderers, generally speaking. I will leave a link to the article about that in the description if you're at all interested in that. But on top of that, I've just heard so many mixed things about Where the Crawdads Sing, and I feel like it will be a kind of a book club group book, an Oprah's book club, Reese's book club, that kind of style of book, and those things never really appeal to me. I have heard that there's beautiful nature writing, which is something I do like in fiction, but I don't think that's going to be enough to redeem it. I feel like it's going to be quite melodramatic. I've also heard it's very predictable, you know exactly what's going to happen from the outset, and the murder that Delia Owens has been accused of was kind of a colonialist, racially charged murder, and I've heard that the handling of race and the kind of ignoring completely of that dynamic of the American South is part of Where the Crawdads Sing, and I'm just not particularly interested in reading from her. I feel like I don't have to justify it this much. I could just be like, nah, not for me, and that's fine, but wouldn't make much of a video. Next on my list is Matt Haig. Now, I know a lot of people love Matt Haig, and I don't want to, if you get a lot out from him, that's great for you, but I don't really think that I would. I feel like from the way people have talked about his books, they are going to be twee and on the nose, things that I don't like, lacking in nuance, and I also have seen him on social media just talking out of his arse quite a lot, and being fairly ignorant of his own privilege and like really digging in to that ignorance, really allowing himself to immerse himself in his own ignorance and acting as if calling him out on his ignorance is in fact the real problem. And I just think he seems very smug and self-satisfied, and if he has helped you and you struggle with mental health, that is great for you, but I don't think I could deal with his smug little face in the back of the book. The next one I have on this list is Melissa Broder. Now this is very much a millennial fiction booktube darling. People who love that kind of, I think CJ from CJ Reads calls it depressed women moving. Melissa Broder is one of those people. She wrote Pisces and Milk Fed, I think that's what they're called. And I'm just not interested. I feel like I am not I feel like the edges of millennial fiction, sometimes it can get me. Like, I've enjoyed Sally Rooney. I'm not gonna say I haven't. I'm very like picky with how much navel gazing I can put up with, and how much like insular self-servingness I can put up with in my fiction. I don't really want that, and that's the vibe that I get from Melissa Broder, that she's like, oh, I'm so deranged and quirky and like willing to go to those disgusting places. And I do enjoy fiction that goes to disgusting places, so it's not that that's the problem. I feel like I'm one of the minority who enjoyed the discomfort of evening, which is very uncomfortable and gross. But so that's not what puts me off Melissa Broder. What puts me off is just there's something about it, and I haven't read any of her work, so I can't say this for sure, but there's something about the way everyone talks about her books that makes me feel like I would find her too pretentious and annoying. And I read pretentious fiction, but I feel like she's the wrong type of pretentious for me. In terms of a classic I'm never going to read, Jack Kerouac. I have never read any of his works, so I can't claim to know much about them, but I don't love mid-century classics, especially mid-century American and British classics. I don't think I really get on with them. I have read mid-century classics from other parts of the world that I've liked, but a lot of the time I don't get on with them, particularly when they're by men. I feel like there was a sort of a distancing from the fiction that was in the style at the time, and it just doesn't work for me. I don't like it. There's sort of, oh, I'm so cool and I'm better than you vibe that I get from those sorts of things sometimes, and I'm just not really that into it. It doesn't really interest me, and I don't think there's anything. I also think that like Jack Kerouac maybe was revolutionary from the 1950s, but it's one of those things that there have been so many derivatives of, and so, it's been so watered down, and also 70 years later, how revolutionary is it? And I know some people are like, oh, you read the history to understand, but if the history is boring, what's the point? Another one I'm never going to read is Haruki Murakami. I know some people love him, I know some people hate him. I don't want to have an opinion. I feel like I don't want to be forced to have an opinion. I know that he's quite famous for his misogyny in a kind of manic pixie dream girl misogyny way, you know, put women on a pedestal and then when women don't live up to that pedestal, kick them. And just also a bit gross, a bit of like over-sexualization. I'm just not really interested. I feel like I can get the vibe from other things, and I don't need to read Murakami for that. I don't have an opinion. This is just what I've heard, and I would like to keep it that way. Okay, so next we have the do I actually like Greek myth retellings or things set in classical antiquity section, because I've got 4 writers on here that write those sorts of things, and I have not got on with. So the first one is Jennifer Saint, who wrote Ariadne and now has Electra coming out, and I love that she's writing about these little lesser known women from Greek mythology. I have a degree in classics. It is an area in which I'm super interested, but I didn't like her writing. I thought there was a lot of like reportage rather than actual plot or delving into people's opinions, and I just couldn't get on board with it, and I found it kind of tiresome. And I've spent a lot of time recently thinking about why Greek myths and what's the importance of that and why are they coming up so much. And you know, like I said, I have a degree in classics and I have written poetry about this very thing. So I'm not saying that I'm above it. I'm just saying like, I'm not sure that it it's been done well by anyone. For me personally, I don't think I've read a Greek myth retelling that I've really loved. So the other people on my list in that section, we have Madeline Miller. I read the Song of Achilles recently. Trashy. My personal opinion is it's trashy, and I know that a lot of people love it, and I don't mean that if you love it, then you love it. I love trashy things. There are trashy things that I love, but Song of Achilles was not the trash for me. It's not my trash. Yeah, it just didn't work for me. And all this talk about the beautiful writing, I'm like, where? Please find me some, because I cannot. And I, oh God, I don't mean to offend anyone, really sorry. But removing all of the things that Achilles actually did in the Trojan War in order to make him acceptable as a love interest was an interesting choice. And yeah, I just think that it didn't have enough nuance. And I was hoping for this like epic love story, but I couldn't give a fuck. And then the other one that's on here is Natalie Haynes. Again, another, feminist Greek myth retellings that everybody loves, but I just think she's a bit mid, to be honest. Her writing style, boring. I found that her description is all right, but her dialogue is terrible. People don't talk like that. And I didn't really love her adaptation of the Oedipus myth in Children of Jocasta. I understood what she was doing in Book of Seas, the one that was the retelling of the Iliad and the Odyssey from the perspective of the women. I understood what she was doing there, but I couldn't get on board with it because it felt like so overblown, so over the top. There was no subtlety or nuance. She was just like hitting you on the face with a newspaper or with her feminist manifesto. And I'm not against feminism at all. And I'm not against people being like very upfront and forward with her feminism in non-fiction. In fiction, it just feels like a diatribe. It felt very, what's the word I want? It felt very didactic, like it was trying to teach me something, and I want my fiction to teach me something through working it out myself. I don't want a monologue or a lecture from my fiction. Put it in non-fiction. I will accept a lecture from you non-fictionally, but in fiction, I just don't want to be told. I don't want to be told. Let me understand that that's your point without you having to shout it in my face. And then the last one of these is Jennifer Saint, who wrote Wolf Den, which isn't actually a Greek myth retelling, but it's set in Pompeii, so before Vesuvius, so fairly close to Vesuvius, because Pliny's in it, so fairly close to Vesuvius, because that's where Pliny dies. Spoiler for the next one. I mean, it happened in 43, 47, 74, somewhere around them. Anyway, I just thought that was really, really mediocre, really badly written, really bad characterization. And so that the whole section there is just about, this is a topic in which I am interested. It is a topic at which I have history with, something that I have spent 4 years of my life dedicated to studying and have really thought about. And you'd think that since I like historical fiction, since I like to read and love stories, since I'm interested in folktales and mythology from around the world, particularly foundation myths, love me a foundation myth, this would be a subject I would just love everything, or at least I would love something. Pat Barker's not on here because while I didn't love The Silence of the Girls, Regeneration trilogy, one of my favourite series of all time, so I can't say I would not read Pat Barker. I would read a lot more Pat Barker, but I can't think of a Greek myth retelling that has really spoken to me. So if you can think of any, let me know in the comments down below that aren't on my list and aren't like the ones on my list. I'd love to hear. And then two big names in historical fiction that I've read one book from and will never be trying again. We have Ken Follett, who wrote The Pillars of the Earth series, trilogy. And again, when I was reading the Goodreads Choice historical fiction, I read one of his books then. And that is another one that is written like a history lesson. Like, reading a Ken Follett book feels like visiting an immersive historical museum. It doesn't feel, my quiche. It doesn't feel like it's really that lived in. The people don't feel real, they feel like actors performing, and he really wants to give you all of the information that he's researched. Really, like, straight up, like, this is how much a penny was worth, this was what you could buy with a penny, how many sheep was equal to how much corn, or how many sheep was equal to how much wheat. And I'm just like, please, can you weave it into the story? Like, if you like Pillars of the Earth, Cathedral by Ben Hopkins, way better, far superior, absolutely brilliant book with a similar premise. And then also on that list, in that vein, is Stacey Hall's, very popular with the Familiars, The Foundling, Miss England. I have read The Foundling and I thought it was not good, really not good. One of those where just putting modern day like ideals into your historical fiction in a way that doesn't really make sense. Like, you're not like looking at an actual historical period and thinking about it in that way. You're just putting a modern people in historical dresses. It's like Bridgerton, but Bridgerton is trashy, and that's my kind of trash. Not the books though. I really didn't enjoy that Julia Quinn book, the one that I read. Found that very uncomfortable. But the TV series I'm all here for. But in Stacey Hall's, it again just feels so earnest and like it's trying so hard. It hasn't really evoked the time period. Everyone feels like modern people and everything's just so nicely and neatly wrapped up. Nothing's earned, and that's not what I want in my fiction. Then the last group is people that I missed the hype on, and it's made me think that maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe my opinion on these two books is the wrong opinion, and everyone else is right. And so I don't want to read them again from remembering how I felt, but I feel like I should, because clearly I missed something. So the first one of them is The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen, which I read like 5 or 6 years ago now, so it's been a while, and I found really uncomfortable to read. And it's a satire, and so it is making points about America and Vietnamese communism and the ways that they were very similar to one another, but were like opposing one another, and the violence that America inflicted in Vietnam upon Vietnamese people with the sense of righteousness. And in the same way, Vietnam, the Viet Cong had this feeling of righteousness of being freedom fighters for their country, but also were enacting violence on the Vietnamese people who were the victims in all of it. First of all, I felt like all of the descriptions of women were overly sexual and really objectifying, and I know that that could be seen to be a way to show that our main character is not sympathetic. The way he views the world is as predatory as the way that America views the world and the Viet Cong. But I just found that uncomfortable, which is fine. The main issue I had with it was the dealing with sexual assault, and because I feel like it talked about America raping Vietnam, and then there are these 2 sexual assault scenes, and sorry, you can skip. I will put a section in here, you can skip if you don't want to hear about this. You know, in Game of Thrones, I think it was series 5, where there was this scene where Sansa gets raped and Theon Greyjoy is watching, and we are sympathising with Theon Greyjoy, and people complained about that because a woman's sexual assault being used to further a man's story. That happens twice in this book, and I found it really hard to get on board with. And I wonder if it's just being 6 years ago, maybe now I would see more nuance in it. But I don't know, and nobody else who's read it has had this problem with it, and that makes me think that maybe I'm the one who's missing something, possibly. And then the other one is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, which a lot of people loved, and you'd think I love historical fiction, particularly love reading historical fiction set in parts of the world that aren't the UK and the US. You'd think I'd be really into Pachinko because it sounds like my sort of thing, but I just didn't get it. I felt like all of the characters were shallow and I couldn't really understand their motivations. I felt like when I was studying drama in my masters, my teacher talked about how things can't just happen to your characters, they have to come out of your characters, and I felt like Pachinko was just a series of things happening to characters rather than things coming from them themselves, and I didn't really enjoy that. And I don't know if it's that we weren't given enough time with each of the characters, and for me that kind of generational saga is not the thing, and maybe that's just like a personal taste. I don't like that, but it's not something that's wrong with the book, and so I'm not wrong, and nor is anyone else. But I don't know, I don't get it, I don't get the hype, and I would love to hear, if you do get the hype, what it is you get about those 2. Am I wrong? Am I just missing something? And we will end it there. Those are the authors that I am not intending to read. I hope you have enjoyed this kind of more like sarcastic video. I usually talk about things I love or recommending new things, but I thought I'd give this a go. Let me know in the comments what you thought, and thank you for watching. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and to subscribe. I put out new videos twice a week, most of the time, and I will see you again very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.